Coming up in our newscast tonight. U.S. Special Representative for North Korea claims Washington is eager to make progress in talks with Pyongyang. During a working group meeting with his South Korean counterpart, Stephen Biegun agrees that a planned groundbreaking ceremony for an inter-Korean rail and road project will be held as scheduled. South Korea's finance ministry releases its monthly assessment report. Clearly shown in the latest Green Book are the government's continuing concerns over domestic and external risks, with the term economic recovery absent for the third straight month. The Seoul Plaza ice skating rink is set up again in front of the capital city hall. Synonymous with the holiday season, the increasingly popular attraction invites visitors to enjoy not only ice skating, but VR entertainment and even the Olympic sport of curling. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Che. It's that time of the year when you're surrounded by things that remind you of Christmas, and New Year holidays are around the corner. One such indicator here in the nation is when a grand outdoor ice skating rink is opened at the Seoul Plaza, complete with meaningful design changes and upgrades. We start our newscast by going straight to our Seo Bo-bin. Bo-bin, what's it like there at this very moment?
Good evening, Daniel. I'm still out here at the Seoul Plaza ice skating rink. The ice skating rink is now closed, but it was open for free today to the public since it was the opening day, with lots of people out skating on the ice. As the ice rink is larger this year and has a range of activities like curling and VR for people to enjoy, the excitement was visible on the faces of people who had the chance to try out the rink on the opening day.
It's really cool, but I've never actually come to this area. So I've come to see the skating rink, and I like that you can see the plaza, and it's literally like in the middle of Seoul, so it's exciting. It's Christmas soon, so this will make me feel like Christmas has come early.
There's quite a lot of people here. Also, it's not too cold today, so I think it will be perfect for skating.
On Christmas and New Year's Eve, there are special events that people can enjoy with their friends and family, such as an igloo experience and Christmas carol contest.
And Bobby, I understand that there are other more exciting events going on around the capital this festive season as well. Do tell us a little bit more about them.
Well, Daniel, not too far from Seoul Plaza, there is also a Christmas festival happening at Cheonggyecheon Stream, with sculptures made with LEDs for people to stroll past and enjoy the winter wonderland. Myeongdong Cathedral, which is in central Seoul, on Christmas Eve there will be a big Christmas market along with Christmas plays and carol singing. And as for the Seoul Plaza ice skating rink, this year it will be open for 52 days until February 10th. It opens daily at 10 a.m. and closes at 9:30 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, and at 11 p.m. on Fridays, Saturdays, and public holidays. There are plenty of events to enjoy around Seoul at this time of the year, so do come by with friends and families for a merry holiday season. Back to you, Daniel.
All right, a lot of things to look forward to this weekend. Thank you for those updates, Bobby. We appreciate it. Moving on to other stories now. America's top envoy on North Korea, Stephen Biegun, met with his counterpart in Seoul. It seems they've found ways to enable the groundbreaking ceremony for the inter-Korean railway project to be held. Also, Washington claims to be ready to get things moving with Pyongyang on preparing for their second summit. Lee Ji-won has the full story.
South Korea and the U.S. seem to have cleared what might have been hurdles to next week's groundbreaking ceremony for the inter-Korean project to connect railways and roads.
At the working group meeting today, we discussed holding the groundbreaking ceremony for the railway and road project as planned next week.
South Korea's nuclear envoy was speaking to the press Friday afternoon after attending the second meeting of the Seoul Washington working group. The groundbreaking ceremony, slated for next week Wednesday, is only symbolic. Any actual construction will begin only in accordance with progress in Pyongyang's denuclearization and after waivers are secured on international sanctions. The ceremony itself won't violate the sanctions, but it needs to be confirmed that the items that will have to be brought to the north for the ceremony won't violate them either. Lee also said that the two Koreas will go ahead with the joint recovery of war remains in the DMZ starting early next year, and that he and the U.S. side were able to resolve the issue of providing North Koreans with antiviral medication, though he didn't elaborate on that. Among the other issues discussed by the two sides were holding a video conference for families from the two Koreas separated for decades by war. Meanwhile, Lee's counterpart Stephen Biegun said that the two allies exchanged ideas on how to move ahead in talks with the North, which included the humanitarian assistance the U.S. is willing to consider giving to the North. When he arrived in Seoul on Wednesday, Biegun announced that the U.S. will review its policies on giving the North humanitarian assistance and will consider easing the restrictions on Americans traveling to the regime. But when asked about the $8 million worth of humanitarian aid the South Korean government previously allocated for the North, Biegun said that more discussions are needed.
We're just beginning a process in the United States where we're going to review how we approve these licenses, and we will be learning and working with our friends in South Korea on next steps in the new year.
While stressing that Washington's policy review does not mean it's lifting or easing the sanctions on North Korea, the nuclear envoy said Washington is eager to move to the next stage with the North Koreans, which will include discussions on a second Pyongyang-Washington summit. 이지원, Arirang News.
Officials from the nation have crossed the border today to inspect roads in North Korea. For 3 days, they will check a 100-kilometer stretch of road on the eastern coast and a 4-kilometer section in the west on Monday. According to officials, 4 days are enough to get the job done, as the inspections are on-site visits without equipment. This comes ahead of a groundbreaking ceremony for the project to connect and modernize railways and roads the two Koreas are planning to hold next Wednesday. The two sides finished checking rail lines in North Korea earlier this month. Seoul's National Security Advisor has cited 2018, the first year of the peace process on the Korean Peninsula. At the Presidential Office Press Center this afternoon, Chung Yu-yong gave a wrap-up of the government's efforts this year on diplomatic and security affairs. He said the Moon administration's greatest achievement was eliminating the threat of war on the peninsula and redefining relationship with Pyongyang. Chung also praised the fact that denuclearization talks with the regime have resumed and that South Korea has been able to continue balanced and cooperative diplomacy with other countries at the same time. Last but not least, he said the government made it clear the best strategy for security is having a strong and responsible national defense. America's Defense Secretary James Mattis has announced his resignation. This comes a day after President Donald Trump's decision to withdraw U.S. forces from Syria against the Pentagon chief's advice. Park Ji-won sheds light on the situation and how his departure could affect the Korean Peninsula.
After 2 years serving as the Trump administration's defense chief, U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis tendered his resignation Thursday. President Trump himself tweeted late Thursday local time, announcing that Mattis will be retiring at the end of February. Mattis indicated in his resignation letter that he was resigning over differences with the president's policies. The retired Marine general also stressed the importance of U.S. cooperation with its allies, ties which have frayed under Trump. Mattis said President Trump has a right, quote, to have a Secretary of Defense whose views are better aligned with him, but reiterated that the U.S. is strengthened by the solidarity of its alliances and its efforts to create an international order that is conducive to the U.S. The president's decision to pull troops out of Syria reportedly went against the wishes of his own defense officials. As Mattis was often dubbed warrior monk for his reticence and stable way of commanding the military, some people have considered him a necessary restraint to Trump's somewhat unpredictable policies. However, one international relations expert here in Korea says not much is likely to change with the change of the defense chief in the U.S.
I don't think there will be any major changes in the U.S. policy direction of focusing on diplomatic negotiations with North Korea for the time being. As Trump reportedly said that he had appreciated Mattis's deep military knowledge and his political sense, I think a next defense chief will also continue to have a similar approach to North Korea policy, at least from the Pentagon's perspective.
But another international relations expert said uncertainty on the Korean Peninsula could be somewhat increased.
Mattis has supported U.S. military strategies based on traditional U.S. hegemony and stability. He is known as a figure who could exert significant restraint on President Trump's unpredictable foreign policies. To me, it seems like we have lost one figure that could exert a restraining influence on Trump if the Democratic Party, which holds a majority in the House, presses Trump on domestic politics next year, and if denuclearization talks with North Korea do not live up to expectations.
Retired Marine General James Mattis was nominated as Secretary of Defense by then President-elect Trump and confirmed by the Senate in January 2017. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
2018 has been quite a year. 3 inter-Korean summits reduced tensions on the peninsula, and 2 Koreas competing as one in various sporting events. We'll take a look back at our top 10 local and global stories through New Year's Eve. To get things started, here's Shin Se-min with the remarkable steps to peace Seoul and Pyongyang has taken.
The leaders of South and North Korea shaking hands at the world's most heavily fortified border, the first such meeting in over a decade, signaling the start of a new era of peace. And the firm handshake and warm embrace between President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was just the first of 3 such meetings in 2018, with the two proving to early skeptics that they plan to keep their promises.
재임기 중에 북핵 문제를 해결하고 평화를 공고하게 하는 것이 저의 목표입니다.
무엇보다 북남 사이의 첨예한 군사적 긴장 상태를 완화하고 조선 반대의 평화적 환경부터 마련해야 합니다.
Backing their verbal pledges with action, the first summit produced the Panmunjom Declaration, which assured the world that military conflict would never again scar the Korean Peninsula. It included working to officially bring an end to the Korean War, the opening of a liaison office in the North's border town of Kaesong, and allowing families separated during the war to meet again. The leaders also agreed to meet again and set up a direct hotline so they could hold candid discussions. And that's exactly what they did. On May 26th, President Moon held an impromptu meeting with the North Korean leader, this time to salvage another meeting, a summit between Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump, scheduled for June 12th in Singapore. And after President Moon helped close the gap between the once archest of enemies, the leaders of Pyongyang and Washington had their first summit in history, where, among other things, Kim and Trump committed to work toward denuclearization as well as lasting peace and prosperity. A couple of months later, when working-level talks between the North and the U.S. seemed to have hit another wall, with President Trump canceling his top diplomat's trip to Pyongyang over the stalled nuclear talks, President Moon stepped in again as the mediator-in-chief. The 3 days President Moon spent in North Korea in mid-September resulted in the Pyongyang Declaration. It set off a wave of inter-Korean endeavors, joint economic projects on rail and roads, the dismantlement of DMZ guard posts by December, followed by mutual verification, and a reciprocal visit to Seoul by Kim at the earliest possible date. And of course, their personal relationship grew stronger, leading to the exchange of gifts like the finest North Korean mushrooms, juicy tangerines from Jeju Island, and even traditional Korean breeds of dogs. However, a handful of promises made by the two leaders have yet to be materialized, like a declaration on officially ending the war and Kim's visit to Seoul by year's end, in what would be the first ever visit to the South Korean capital by a North Korean leader since the peninsula was divided. Despite the undeniable progress made this year, maintaining friendly ties will remain a challenge in 2019. It's still unclear whether concessions will come from the North and the U.S. to grease the tracks toward denuclearization, but both Koreas seem firmly on track to cement a powerful reconditioning of relations on the Korean Peninsula. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
During their three summits, President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un discussed ways to work together. Seoul placed emphasis on inter-Korean cooperation as a means to catalyze the regime's denuclearization. Woo Jung-hee helped highlight the key areas of cross-border cooperation this year.
Lowering military tensions and communicating 24/7 while cooperating in a range of fields from the economy to humanitarian issues. That's how the inter-Korean relations, which were cold and hostile until last year, can be summed up for 2018. South and North Korea held several talks throughout 2018 to implement the summit agreements on railway and road connections, forestry cooperation, and health and medical care. Though they face some restrictions due to international sanctions, they're conducting joint inspections on railways and roads and are looking to hold a ceremony next Wednesday to mark their joint project. South Korea has delivered chemicals for pest control to the north and conducted some actual operations on the ground. It's also looking to share data with the north on contagious diseases for cooperation in public health. Efforts are being made on the humanitarian front as well, especially for thousands of families separated by the Korean War. The two Koreas held reunions for war-torn families for the first time in 3 years in August and are now looking to enable video reunions and restore meeting facilities. All these matters, from setting up talks to exchanging documents to devise work plans, are dealt with at the Joint Liaison Office. It's where both South and North Korean officials work and stay for direct face-to-face communication. Meanwhile, the area where the two Koreas have made the most significant progress is on the military front. Following through with the military agreement signed in September, Seoul and Pyongyang have dismantled guard posts located within 1 kilometer of the military demarcation line. This is part of attempts to show their willingness to stop hostile acts. They've also linked up a road connecting each other across the DMZ to together recover remains from the Korean War. In 2019, it's expected that inter-Korean interactions and exchanges will only deepen further with regular inter-Korean talks. Seoul's goals are to create permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula, build a sustainable relationship, and finally form an economic community with the North. Woo Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Shifting our focus to headline makers coming from outside the nation, America and China's ongoing trade war had a deep impact on the global economy. Our Kim Jun delves deeper into the multi-billion-dollar tariff battle between the two economic superpowers that's threatening to spill into the new year.
It may be too soon to reprieve upon news China and the U.S. are working to turn their trade truce, forged on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Argentina on December 1st, to something more permanent. The tit-for-tat tariffs executed earlier this year were widely viewed as merely being a cover for a hegemonic fight in the economic, technological, and defense sectors, as China challenges the U.S. Following the trade ceasefire, Washington agreed to delay a tariff increase on more than $250 billion worth of Chinese imports to 25%, from 10% originally planned to go into effect on January 1st, while China agreed to resume purchases of U.S. farm and energy commodities. They're reportedly planning to hold meetings to hammer out a deal on trade next month. Reducing U.S. trade deficit in its trade with China, which recorded $375 billion last year, was cited as a major priority for the Trump administration, according to U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin in an interview with Bloomberg earlier this week. He said it's to map out a specific timeline, both realistic and verifiable, that the two countries can carry out. But concerns still loom on the notion of how they'll iron out their differences. Two main questions reverberate. If the truce is temporary and will only last 90 days, is it reasonable for the U.S. to expect sweeping reforms concerning market access and intellectual property rights, regulatory reforms in this short span of time? And if China presses on with these measures, would these not shock the Chinese economy? The International Monetary Fund has already forecast China is set to record the slowest growth rate in 28 years in 2018 of 6.6%, putting a damper on the industrial plan of President Xi Jinping's Made in China 2025 to become a global powerhouse by 2049. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Seoul's Finance Ministry released its monthly assessment of local economic conditions based on key data such as export, job growth, and investment. The government's concerns over domestic and external risks continued through December. Kim Hye-sung has more from the latest Green Book.
The Ministry of Economy and Finance has omitted the word recovery from its monthly Green Book report for the third consecutive month. It said domestically, the Korean economy is backed by solid exports and consumption, but investment and job growth remain sluggish, and there are still uncertainties stemming from the U.S.-China trade war. Since last December, the Finance Ministry has said the local economy is on a steady recovery path, but starting in October, the word recovery has not been mentioned. The Green Book said in October there was a slight rise in consumption of 0.2% compared to the month before. Industrial production expanded by 0.4% on rising demand for transport equipment. On the trade front, exports rose in November by 4.5% on year to nearly $52 billion, the third highest figure on record thanks to solid semiconductor and petrochemical exports. In terms of employment, Korea added 165,000 new jobs on year in November, the first time it's added more than 100,000 in 5 months, but unemployment remained high at 3.2%. As for investment in the construction sector fell 2.2% on month in October. Facilities investment grew by around 2% thanks to higher spending on transport equipment. But in the third quarter as a whole, facilities investment actually fell more than 4% on quarter and more than 7% on year because of the sluggish manufacturing sector. The Finance Ministry pointed to the weak job market, the U.S.-China trade conflict, and U.S. rate hikes as the three main risks to the Korean economy and vowed to help support growth through an expansionary fiscal policy. Kim Hye-sung, Arirang News.
The Korea Exchange announced the local stock market's last trading day of the year will be next Friday. Trading will resume on January 2nd, but markets will open at an hour later than usual at 10 a.m. local time. The changes will affect the benchmark Kospi, the tech-heavy Kosdaq, as well as derivative markets. For those expecting to be paid dividends this year, the ex-dividend date for listed firms whose fiscal year-end is coming up is next Thursday. South Korea's passports and vehicle license plates are given a makeover. The Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism announced the final design it has chosen for the new e-passports that will be used starting 2020. The cover features an embossed taeguk mark, the symbol found in South Korea's national flag, and the pages inside show pictures of the country's cultural relics. The changes are not only cosmetic, the new passports offer improved security. Made of polycarbonate, it's more resistant to damage. Ordinary citizens will have blue, dark gray for government officials. As for diplomats, they'll carry red versions. Starting next year, local license plates will feature Korea's taeguk symbol and an extra digit. A reflective film and a hologram will help prevent forgery. Over in London, passengers are finally flying in and out of Gatwick Airport after drones flying in the area prompted officials to shut it down for more than 32 hours. One of Britain's busiest airports, Gatwick was closed from Wednesday night local time after the two large drones were spotted near the airfield. The last drone sighting came more than 24 hours after the first, leaving hundreds of flights grounded and affecting more than 110,000 passengers during the busiest travel period of the year. Police are still trying to locate the device and its pilot and are considering plans to shoot it down. The Army has also been deployed. Officers say the drone flight was not terror-related, but was a deliberate act of disruption. Time to turn to Michelle Bach for the weather updates before planning our weekend. Michelle, seems like we have a break in terms of temperatures, but instead of freezing readings, we have heavily polluted air.
Yes, Daniel. In fact, the dust concentration has worsened over the last couple of hours. Now, this toxic smog will last until tomorrow, so if you are planning an outing, make sure to have your masks at all times. And until tomorrow, the nation and the East Asian neighbors will be unusually warm under mostly partly cloudy skies. About Tokyo, we'll look forward to some rain. Now, we will have a warmer start too, about 2 to 5 degrees higher than today. Seoul beginning at 2 degrees Celsius, while Busan and Jeju starts at 9 and 11 degrees respectively. In most places, the afternoon will be too warm for those thick paddings, with temperature rising into the teens. And the fine dust will gradually dissipate by Sunday afternoon. And starting next week, temperatures are expected to drop big, leading to a brisk Christmas morning. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for you on tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Thank you for watching. Here's wishing you an incredible weekend.